Hey guys, here's an update on my radio projects. The Spartan Junior is just about done. I cleaned up the steel chassis as best I could, and then I went ahead and repainted the RF shields and the transformer. If you recall in the earlier video, I determined that these had been painted and the paint was deteriorating a bit. So what I used was Rust-Oleum Specialty Metallic Silver or Chrome, and it actually came out better than I was expecting. A little bit of dust settled on it, and there's a scratch on this can, so once this dries a bit further, I am going to wet sand it and give it a second coat, and I think this guy will be pretty much done. So that brings me back to the Westinghouse WR8. If you recall, that is this grandfather clock-looking radio with a radial 82 chassis in it. Here's the power supply audio amp. I've been restuffing the caps for both this and the RF tuner chassis. Here's the main power supply filter capacitor. I decided to go with non-polarized polyester caps instead of electrolytics because that's what the original used. Well, it didn't use polyester, but they were non-polarized. So I got a 3.3, a 3.3, and a 0.05 microfarad in here. That's all that was in this giant can here. And this was a tar-filled cap, so it was quite a treat. I ended up basically cooking this in the oven for a while till the tar and the metal loosened up, and then I slid all the guts out, and then took lacquer thinner and cleaned all the residue out, and then I repainted the can with Rust-Oleum. I think they call it leather brown. And it's a perfect match for the original paint. Eventually I will be cleaning this down and repainting the entire thing the same color. Now with these new caps in, it's far smaller than the original cap was, so if I put this back down, and this is how it's supposed to go, it'll just fall inside the can. So what I want to do is use this square stock here, hardwood stock, and cut out 4 pieces and then some side pieces and make a little wooden box to support this plate. And here is one of the caps from the tuner chassis. Again, various non-polarized caps. This was tar filled as well. I got the guts out the same way, heated it up, extracted the tar, used lacquer thinner to get the residue out, and mounted the caps onto the old cardboard plate. It slides in like so. I repainted the metal can flat black, which is in the radio it'll look like this. No, this is going to be loose inside, so what I'm going to do is fill this up with some black caulk. But I don't want to fill the whole thing up because it'll just be too messy in case anybody ever needs to get inside again. So I'm going to take a piece of cardboard, make like a little dam, and just fill maybe ½ an inch with black caulk, and hopefully that'll seal it off and look fairly authentic. So that brings me back to the RF tuner chassis. This radio had sat in the basement in Chicago for probably decades, and unfortunately water dripped on it in a few spots, in particular here in the control area. I've already removed the rust, but it's quite pitted here. This originally was cadmium plated and the whole thing should be nice and shiny, but it's quite dull and pitted here. Even worse, there was a control there, the local distance switch, which I tried my best to use WD-40 and so on to free this up, but alas, the switch was just too far gone. So I've been looking for a replacement ever since, and I just about given up hope when, lo and behold, I was searching around on eBay for a speaker for my RCA 222 I just got last weekend, when I stumbled across a Radiola 82 chassis, which is what this really is, for 15 bucks. So I pounced on it, and it was a buy it now option, so I no competition for it, and here it is. It just arrived today. Best thing is that here's a local distance switch, works fine. One thing I found curious though is that this chassis, although it's identical in every other regard, it's not cadmium plated. It's just raw steel. And likewise, this has some nice copper for these grid shield tubes, and this again is just plain steel. So You know, I'm not sure what the difference is, because otherwise this chassis is actually in better condition, and I might have just gone with this, but this does look better with the nice shiny cadmium plated components versus this dull metal. But I will certainly scavenge parts from this as needed. So for instance, I'll get the switch. Also the dial scale seems to be in pretty good condition, and some of the parts underneath I may end up scavenging. Speaking of underneath this guy, there's also some corrosion issues where there are some rust spots here and there, including on this can, and it's still pretty corroded up there. Yeah, nobody will see this stuff, it's underneath, but it just polishes up so nice with the copper and the cadmium, I couldn't resist. But the main problem remaining with this, now that I got the switch issue resolved, is the tuning shaft. This is not only bent, but it's actually eccentric. So even if I straighten this portion out, the whole shaft is wobbly. So I suspect this got bent as well. I can probably bend and straighten out. That's what I am going to try doing. But in case I can't, I can possibly extract out of this guy, which is rusty, but otherwise it's true. Here's the cans on this guy, which aren't corroded, but again, these aren't cadmium plated, although this is copper. I suspect they use different metals because, you know, there's inductors inside here, and the shielding does actually affect the coils. You know, if you use iron shielding versus copper, it will affect the inductance of the coils inside there. But yeah, it is kind of cool for just 15 bucks to get, you know, a mirror image with all the components. There's those block capacitors I was just showing you that I've been rebuilding. So, oh, speaking of finding duplicate items, something else that was also only 15 bucks was another one of these speakers. If you recall, I'd spent quite a bit of time rebuilding that speaker, and there was one listed for like 15 bucks. An exact match with the cone in perfect condition. So I was thinking, geez, I could have saved myself a lot of work, but I was happy to see that it sold for quite a bit more, like closer to 100, I think. So I didn't feel too bad about that, wasting my efforts on that. Well, I should say my efforts weren't wasted. I got a good speaker. I saved myself some money, so not too bad. All right, I think that's all for tonight.